Oh, I'm sorry. You caught me writing. Many of the Founding Fathers are known for their extensive writings through their careers. In David Ramsay's The History of American Revolution, he claims the pen and the press had merit equal to that of the sword. Well, if that's the case, then Alexander Hamilton may have been one of the most influential players in the fight for our independence. He was famous for his writings, and I am told that he often wrote like he was running out of time. But that is far from his only skill. If you were to ask the average person to name the founding fathers of this great nation, you can be sure you get some of the usual answers. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, James Madison, and so on. These men are immortalized in our history. There are chapters and whole books about them. There are classes dedicated to their study, and even statues and monuments to commemorate their achievements, and for good reason. These men are some of the most influential people in the narrative of the American Revolution. But there was another man whose life was interwoven into these other founding fathers' lives. He worked alongside, counseled, fought against and with, and helped forge the nation together with these other great men. And yet, his fame does not reach the same height as theirs. That man is Alexander Hamilton. Now, it may be that his fame could never reach the same heights as these other men that I've mentioned, because, unlike them, he was never president. But other founding fathers who were never president often seem to see more fame than Hamilton, like Patrick Henry and Benjamin Franklin. Alexander Hamilton had quite the career. He was a tactical genius on the battlefield, which proved helpful at the time of the American Revolution. He was an integral part to George Washington's inner circle leading up to the conclusion of the war, and then afterwards as a member of his cabinet. And probably his most famous actions were in the political realm. Alexander Hamilton, due to his political acumen, military genius, and close ties to General Washington, played a crucial role in helping win the Revolutionary War and shaping not only the early American nation, but also our nation today. Alexander Hamilton was born January 11th, 1755, or 1757, depending on who you ask, in Charlestown on the island of Nevis in the Caribbean. After many hardships growing up, including the death of his mother, death of his cousin, and the abandonment of his father, he impressed his community with his intellect and his success in running a shipping company. So impressed were they that the people of his community collected a fund to send him to North America for a formal education. In 1774, he attended King's College in New York City, where he honed his intellect and his powers of speech and in writing. He remained an avid student and published some of his early works while there, including The Farmer Refuted and A Full Vindication of the Measures of Congress, as seen in the revolutionary writings of Alexander Hamilton. His time in the college was cut short due to the impending Revolutionary War and the British occupation of New York City. It is here that we see one facet of Alexander Hamilton's skill set and importance to the Revolution, and that's his military prowess. Hamilton believed if Britain chose force, he recommended guerrilla warfare, harass and exhaust British forces by frequent skirmishes and incursions, rather than taking the open field with them, as Richard Brookhiser notes. Even early on, as a teenager, Hamilton understood that the American cause and forces would not be able to stand against the might of a superpower with an established army and navy, at least not in open combat, not this early on in the conflict. He then joined the Corsicans, a militia group that made a name for themselves by stealing cannons from the British forces in New York City. This led to him being made a captain of the artillery company in New York, as in Mitchell's book, Alexander Hamilton, The Revolutionary Years. He was even part of the nighttime crossing and surprise assault of Trenton in George Washington's bold and astonishing crossing of the Delaware. Hamilton was not done rising in popularity and renown, though. He was made a lieutenant colonel by George Washington, which started one of his and Washington's most important and influential relationships, but more on that later. Washington, known for his ability to see potential in people and needing help in the administration of an army, kept Hamilton as a close aide and off the battlefield, much to Hamilton's displeasure. This went on for years, with Hamilton often trying to convince Washington to place him in charge of men in the field, but he was always rebuffed. This came to a head in February of 1781 when Washington and Hamilton had an altercation. Washington had asked to speak to Hamilton, and Hamilton said it would be just a moment. After being stopped in the hall by two colleagues, Hamilton finally made it to a perplexed Washington. "Colonel Hamilton," said he, You have kept me waiting at the head of the stairs these 10 minutes. I must tell you, sir, you treat me with disrespect." Hamilton replied, without petulancy, but with decision, "I am not conscious of it, sir, but since you thought it necessary to tell me so, we part." "Very well, sir," said Washington, "if it be your choice," or something to that effect. And they separated. Hamilton then writes to his father-in-law, "I sincerely believe my absence, which did so much umbrage, did not last 10 minutes, as notes Emery Spear." This schism between the two would last until Washington invited Hamilton back into his service, with promise of command. This command included 3 battalions, which led to the decisive and war-ending Battle of Yorktown. Hamilton and his men charged Redoubt No. 10 with unloaded weapons, so as not to give away their position, and engaged in grueling melee combat with their fixed bayonets. Though he did not have as an illustrious of a career as Washington did, and was kept off the battlefield for years of the war, Hamilton's time and time again showed a true understanding of tactics and grit, which saw him gain both fame and promotion in his military career and admiration of his fellow soldiers. Another very important part of Hamilton's legacy is his relationship with George Washington. Washington saw the potential and ambition inside this young, brash, and intelligent man and quickly called him to be one of His Excellency's personal aides. Hamilton was so perceptive, and he and the general thought so much alike, that he soon took to writing Washington's correspondence for him. Washington would use him for important missions, ones that he knew Hamilton's skill with the quill or persuasion would be useful, like getting reinforcements from Horatio Gates. And Hamilton's French provided invaluable in proceedings with the most important ally to America during the time. It is widely agreed that part of the relationship stems from the men's similarities. Hamilton must have, to some degree, reminded General Washington of himself when he was younger. After their fallout, Washington left the possibility of reconciliation open. He understood Hamilton's skills and held no long-term ill will towards him. After the war, their friendship was back on the rise. Hamilton, along with many others, called for Washington to be the first president. Peter Henrique says that Hamilton didn't so much as suggest Washington to be the first president, but rather said that if he didn't, he was going back on an unspoken promise and commitment he made by attending the Constitutional Convention, though Hamilton later apologized for that statement. Washington assigned Hamilton as his Secretary of Treasury, which would see Hamilton's foray into the political realm take off. Washington even enlisted his good friend Hamilton to help in drafting his farewell address, an important part of an event that would shape our nation. It showed the most powerful man in the country step down after his terms and relinquish power, which is something that very few rulers of the time, if any, would do. Hamilton was integral to Washington in friendship, in administration, and collaboration. The most important man of the era, and one of the most important men in history, relied on Hamilton, maybe more than any other, to help him win the war and then to build the nation and rule afterwards. These accomplishments would earn Hamilton the title of the indispensable man from Washington, as Henriquez notes. And Washington would pen to Hamilton, "In every relation which you have borne to me, I have found that my confidence in your talents, exertions, and integrity have been well placed." The final and most important of Hamilton's achievements come in the political arena. This started when the failing Articles of Confederation united Washington and Hamilton to start working together towards a stronger and more central government. Morse writes, at this time, most people, and Alexander, would agree that the Confederation was neither fit for war or peace. Hamilton was a staunch advocate for the Constitution. He understood the need for a stronger government with more power than the Confederation allowed. In trying to get the Constitution ratified, he joined up with John Jay and James Madison to write the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers were a series of essays written with the intent to explain the Constitution and why it was needed. They opened the Federalists with this sentence: "After an unequivocal experience of the inefficacy of the subsisting federal government, you are called upon to deliberate a new Constitution for the United States of America." Hamilton wrote a majority of the 85 essays that made up the Federalist Papers. Murray, author of Alexander Hamilton, America's Forgotten Founder, states that the Supreme Court still looks back at the Federalist Papers today to glean meaning into what the Constitution intends, and that it is still a premier text on political science. Through the publication of the Federalist Papers and hours of debate in the Constitutional Convention meetings, the Constitution was finally ratified by the final state, New York, on July 26, 1788. Hamilton's other major and lasting political achievement was the formation of the national bank and a national debt. Hamilton saw an opportunity to boost the economy by acquiring all state debt and pulling it into a national debt, as well as giving the federal government the right to tax imports and tax alcohol. He planned to finance the country through the early years until he could get his feet under it and the economy rolling by selling notes like the ones given to Revolutionary War veterans, and also selling these notes of credit to foreign powers. He also understood the need for a federal mint and how the government's ability to print money could boost or crash the market. One of Murray's concluding thoughts was, "The financial plan proposed by Hamilton and enacted by Congress not only strengthened the central government, but dramatically improved the popular support of the government and thereby strengthened the Union. The effect of the Bank of the United States being chartered increased the flow of money in circulation and made more money available for investments and commercial enterprises, powering a growing economy." His work with the ratification of the Constitution allowed us a strong form of Republican government that has lasted over 200 years. In addition to that governance, we have the addition of the Bill of Rights to the Constitution that guarantees us rights that many other countries don't have. The Constitution, coupled with the fact that the national bank and debt helped our country prosper and grow in an economy that continues to this day to be the greatest in the world, are all, in some way, attributed to Alexander Hamilton. So why his lack of fame in modern times? Is it because he was never a president? Is it his very public and shameful affair? The fact that he died much earlier than his counterparts? I'm not sure there is one answer. But what is evident to me, and to anyone that studies the Little Lion, is that his fingerprints are left on many facets of the American Revolution and the legacy that continues today. Thank you.